So Neville Gallimore and Tristan Wirfs are freaks, and we have to talk about it after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today, oh my goodness, Neville Gallimore and Tristan Wirfs, what are you doing at this NFL Combine? Like, Chris Claremont was actually writing comic books about you. It's called X-Men. My goodness. Neville Gallimore is 304 pounds. His first attempt in the 40-yard dash, he ran 4.85, which is flat out flying, right? Last year, everybody freaked out when Quentin Williams dropped 4.8 as a defensive lineman. And at the same weight, we have a faster time on the second attempt from Neville Gallimore at 4.79. Now, we got to tell you, Neville Gallimore had been on Bruce Feldman's freaks list for like 3 years running, right? Because he had reportedly been running like 300 or 4.7 in the 40 at 3:30, right? I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be able to do. But then you watched him run this thing in his skivvies and flat out rolling folks. Like, we're talking about men that are 70 pounds lighter than him, that are going to play professional football, who will never get below 4.8 in a 40. And Neville Gallimore's out there doing that in his skivvies at 304 pounds. And then Tristan Wirfs, who's 320, out here dropping 4.86. Also doing like the standing broad jump at like 10 feet in an inch. They are absolutely athletic freaks. Like, this is an Adrian Peterson level of alien. All right? Like, these two dudes must have escaped from Area 51. And now we have to really talk about Neville Gallimore as being one of the better players to come out of Canada, at least to get in the Combine, right? And that's what I'm getting at. The Combine is for feats of athleticism. It is an SAT. It is standardized testing. Everybody goes through the same thing. You hope to not necessarily screw it up, but some of the stuff that you're asked to do does not necessarily translate to a football field, right? Nobody's going to actually run 40 yards in a straight line for the most part. It's really about those first 10 yards, and any NFL personnel, executive, scout, what have you, is going to tell you nobody uses the Combine as the end-all, be-all. You can annihilate the interviews. You can annihilate the athletic performance measures. You can annihilate the whiteboard, but nobody's going to draft you highly based on what you did in the Combine. But it doesn't hurt to go out there and do what Tristan Wirfs and what Neville Gallimore have done, which is demonstrate that they're probably the best athletes at this entire event. And that includes wide receivers like CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, Justin Jefferson. That includes Jalen Hurts and his 4.5 40, right? I'm not sure that we're used to seeing this kind of athleticism at that size, but I also don't necessarily think that we're going to get a Mike Mamula moment either, right? I don't think that Tristan Wirfs or Neville Gallimore are going to be absolute flameouts in the NFL, and I don't think they're the kind of people that you're going to trade up to go get. And by trade up, I mean in the first round. Maybe you trade up to go get Neville Gallimore in the second round, or Tristan Wirfs if he's still there in the second round. I think Wirfs is going to go in the first just because his positional need. But now we're talking about Gallimore, who is able to provide you something that, well, every NFL team needs, which is interior defensive line help. We know that it's really difficult to find great offensive linemen. It's really difficult to find great quarterbacks, and it's really difficult to find great defensive linemen. And the kind of numbers that Gallimore is putting down at this Combine would lead you to believe what we all thought, which is that he was being used wrongly at the University of Oklahoma for the first 4 years that he was there. This guy who's a redshirt senior and was a jewel coming out of that 2015 class and up there with Chuba Hubbard as two of the best guys to come out of Canada in the last 10 years, right? We'll see what Hubbard is able to do next year coming off of a 2,000-yard rushing season and where he goes in the NFL draft. Most people would probably slot him as a first-round pick this year. But with Gallimore, now you get to ask this question of not only was he being used incorrectly underneath Mike Stoops, but what else can he do if you put him into a single gap scheme instead of having him play the zero technique in that nose? Like, it ain't as if Oklahoma hasn't had great defensive tackle talent. Jordan Phillips is a great defensive tackle talent. And when you asked him to play that nose, he decided to take it on and he made it his position and then was able to use that to get into the NFL and is still playing in the NFL today. Now, we could talk about what you think about Jordan Wade, right? We could talk about what you think of some other guys that haven't necessarily panned out at that defensive tackle position. But of the guys that were playing last year, I don't know that people would have bet on Neville Gallimore as much as perhaps even a Q Overton or Dylan Fontenot. I didn't think that the man would be able to put together the kind of season that he did and vault himself into this conversation of a fringe first-round pick along with the likes of Kenneth Murray Jr. and others when we're talking about defensive players in the Big 12, right? James Lynch, I think, depending on how he basically gets evaluated by the right team, could end up there, but his positional value is a little bit further down based on him being a defensive end. If he was 304 pounds and he's running 4'8", I think we would say the same thing. But I'm not sure that I've seen a guy in back-to-back years at the Combine be as big as Quinnen Williams and be as big as Neville Gallimore and be able to throw down times like those guys, right? We're talking about Quinnen Williams being a first-round pick, a top 5 overall pick. We're not going to be talking about Neville Gallimore in that way because it's a different kind of draft. But I think that somebody is going to get perhaps the sneaky best pick of any Oklahoma football player in some time because everybody knows who Kyler Murray was. Everybody knew who Baker Mayfield was. Everybody knows who CeeDee Lamb is, right? Marquise Brown. We're really getting to a group of people that don't understand what kind of a talent Neville Gallimore is and could be. And I think that if we're really paying attention, we could talk about him being the first all-pro Oklahoma defender since Gerald McCoy if he gets into the right situation. Even more so than Kenneth Murray, because I think that Gallimore has a better chance of ending up in a right situation because he can do more things than Murray can do, at least right now. Murray's still got some work to do on the whiteboard and understanding the scheme, unless you put him in a point-and-shoot kind of situation like he was at the will with Alex Grinch and Brian Odom in last year's scheme. You're going to draft him on pure athleticism because the Combine is the kind of event that Kenneth Murray Jr. is just going to dominate. But that's because the standardized testing fits for what he does well. Run fast, jump high, and really just do what you ask him to do on that one spot. Asking him a process of a lot of information on the fly, he's something he's still getting used to and trying to get better at. But it's not necessarily what we're talking about with football here, right? We're talking about how does this man compare with his football athleticism, which is another reason why I really value Mark Brandstad and the folks at Tracking Football, because they'll use other metrics, notably wrestling and track and field events, to evaluate a football player's football athleticism and not necessarily say this is going to make a great football player. It would just say these traits can lead you to believe that this man can be an absolutely outstanding and excellent football player. But Gallimore also was coming out of Canada and not necessarily an outstanding football program. It's outstanding for what it was in Canada. But they would come down to like teams and play Texas and whatnot, and they get thrashed while Gallimore would have to show out. And he ends up getting the offer and accepting it to Oklahoma. But at the time, you're also talking about Neville Gallimore could end up at Ohio State playing for Larry Johnson. And all Larry Johnson has done is turn all the dudes that showed up there with absolute talent into first-round picks. And in some cases, some of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, like Nick Bosa, right? We'll see what Chase Young turns out to be. And we're still waiting on Draymond to do whatever he's going to do. But we could talk about Joey Bosa, right? We could talk about a number of guys. Like, I think the only one that hasn't necessarily panned out at Ohio State that came out and was highly talked about on the defensive line was probably Vernon Golston, right? Who might go down as an all-time first-round draft bust. But I'm excited about watching big, fast dudes because big, fast dudes is a rare thing. And while I don't buy into the NFL Combine and I think that it's antiquated and we don't need it, I think that if you want to group everybody together and have them do medicals and do interviews, fine, but we no longer need the Combine itself. That said, how often are you going to get to see a 304-pound individual run 4.79 in the 40-yard dash? How often are you going to get to see a 320-pound individual run 4.86 in the 40-yard dash? How often are you going to get to see a 300-pound person run 40 yards in one direction at full go, right? And then look better doing it than he has any right to be doing it. How often are you going to get to see a guy like Henry Ruggs try to assault the Combine record for 40-yard dash held by John Ross and try to be the first guy to go sub 4.2? This is the only event and only environment that allows for that thing to happen among football players. And that's awesome. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.